The key to the Madeleine McCann case isn't in a police report, but in an audio recording that was never supposed to exist. An audio file that, according to persistent rumors, captures an explosive fight between Gerry McCann and Kate's father, Brian Healy. This confrontation isn't just family drama. It's the piece that might explain why a family, united in public, seemed to be falling apart in private. It reveals an uncomfortable truth about tragedies. Sometimes the greatest danger doesn't come from the outside, but from the truths we try to silence within our own walls. And today, we're going to dissect the events that led to this confrontation and reveal the threat that allegedly silenced the family forever. The story the world knows is a drama that brought the world to a standstill. Praia da Luz, Portugal, May 3, 2007. A holiday resort, a group of doctor friends enjoying dinner. The devoted parents, Kate and Gerry McCann, relax just a stone's throw from the apartment where their 3-year-old daughter, the angel child, is sleeping. Around 10 o'clock at night, the mother returns to the room and finds the bed empty. The window open. Chaos erupts. A frantic search begins. The world's press turns the little girl into an icon and her parents into victims of an unimaginable tragedy. This is the official narrative, the story that became a myth. That story traveled the entire globe. And speaking of which, a curiosity just occurred to me. What city are you watching me from right now? Comment below. It's always incredible to see how our community of curious minds spreads across all continents, all connected by the same search for answers. Now let's get back to the story they told us. But what if the united family facade was just that? A facade? What if behind the cameras a silent war was being waged, fueled by guilt and resentment? The hidden truth, which we will begin to unravel today, is that the public comments and alleged private regrets of Kate's father, Brian Healy, about the night of the disappearance, created an unbearable tension with Gerry McCann, culminating in a confrontation that defined the future of the family's silence. And exposing this is the first step of our mission. We are building the black box, the complete confidential archive of this investigation. Every video we release is another document we leak into this archive, making public what they tried to hide. We will not ask for the truth. We will leak the truth until it becomes the only possible story. Operation Black Box begins now. So what exactly did Brian Healy say that provoked Gerry's fury? And how did this family feud become the key to understanding the silence that followed? To understand the fight, we first need to understand the fracture. The public image of the McCanns and their family was one of unshakable unity against tragedy. But the investigation's files and newspaper clippings from the time tell a very different story. A story of tension, regret, and ultimately, a confrontation that defined the silence that followed. Our investigation begins not with an audio file, but with words. Words spoken by Kate's father, Brian Healy, a working-class man from Liverpool who suddenly found himself at the center of the world's biggest missing person case. In the early days, his stance was what you'd expect, unconditional support for his daughter and son-in-law. But as the weeks went by and the Portuguese police investigation began to drift away from the abduction theory, the first cracks started to appear. In May 2008, a year after the disappearance, the Liverpool Echo published an interview with Brian Healy that shocked many who were following the case. In it, he expressed deep regret and a veiled criticism of the decision to leave the children alone. He said, and I quote, "If I'd have been there, I'd have said, 'You're not going out and leaving the kids.' I'd have offered to babysit. I'd have shaken every one of them." These are not the words of a man fully convinced of the abduction narrative. They are the words of a grandfather wrestling with guilt and the idea that a different decision could have changed everything. But the most explosive statement came later, in September 2020, when the New Zealand Herald revealed details from the police files. According to the report, Brian Healy had allegedly admitted to friends that Kate and Gerry regularly used Calpol, a common pain reliever and infant sedative in the UK, to help the children sleep. This information on its own is not proof of a crime, but in the context of a missing child and the theory of a possible accidental overdose that the Portuguese police were investigating, it was a bombshell. It was the first time a family member, Kate's own father, had given credibility, even indirectly, to one of the McCann's most feared lines of inquiry. Their story simply doesn't add up. What do you think is the most glaring inconsistency so far? Brian Healy's public support or his private regrets about sedation? Leave your analysis in the comments. Each of your theories is an intelligence report we add to our archive. Together, we are mapping the weaknesses of the official narrative. Now let's connect these dots to the fight. The leaked audio is, to this day, an unverified rumor that circulates on internet forums. There is no proof of its existence. But as in many investigations, rumors can be the smoke that leads us to the fire. The theory, based on accounts from anonymous sources who allegedly had knowledge of the family dynamics, is that Gerry McCann confronted Brian Healy about these indiscretions. Imagine the scene. Gerry, a consultant physician, a man accustomed to control, watching his father-in-law, a man from a different generation and social class, undermine the carefully constructed narrative that was protecting him and his wife. Brian's frustration, his grandfatherly guilt, was becoming a risk to the McCann's public relations strategy. The alleged fight, according to the rumors, wasn't about the pain of loss. It was about information control. Gerry, furious, would have accused Brian of betrayal, of talking to the wrong people, of giving ammunition to their enemies. And this is where the threat comes into play. The threat wouldn't have been physical, but emotional and psychological. If you keep talking, you will destroy your own daughter. Do you want Kate to be arrested because of your big mouth? We have the best lawyers, the press on our side. You have nothing. Shut up for Kate's sake. This is not a conversation between a grieving son-in-law and father-in-law. This is a power dynamic. Gerry, with the backing of the British media and political machine, silencing the dissenting voice within his own family. The voice of doubt, the voice of regret, the voice that dared to mention the word Calpol. What makes this theory so powerful is not the existence of the audio, but the fact that it perfectly explains what happened next: the silence. After 2008, Brian Healy's public appearances became rare. His veiled criticisms vanished. The family's united front was restored, but at an invisible cost. The price of silence wasn't paid with money, but with the suppression of a grandfather's doubt. Science, in the form of the sniffer dogs, had already pointed to a tragedy inside the apartment. Forensic logic had already dismantled the story of the window. But it was family psychology, the power dynamic between Gerry and Brian, that may have ensured the truth remained a family secret. Science was screaming that a tragedy happened within those four walls, and Gerry's behavior was screaming that he knew it. So if the abduction story is a sham and the family was in internal conflict, what really happened that night? To answer that, we need to do what the police never did: reconstruct the night of the crime based on the evidence, not the fiction. Forget the story of the abductor. The key to understanding what happened that night isn't a stranger lurking in the shadows, but the tension that already existed within the family itself. The night of May 3rd wasn't the beginning of the tragedy. It was the explosion of a time bomb that was already ticking. Let's reconstruct the events, but this time through the lens of family conflict. The night begins with a practice that, according to grandfather Brian Healy himself, worried him: the use of sedatives like Calpol to ensure the children slept. It wasn't a malicious act, but a shortcut, a way to make sure the adults' evening wouldn't be interrupted. That night, the shortcut became a cliff edge. Around 9 o'clock, Gerry McCann does his check. He enters the apartment, but this time, something is terribly wrong. Madeleine won't wake up. He tries to shake her. Nothing. The panic that sets in is not that of a father finding an empty bed. It's the ice-cold panic of a doctor who realizes there may have been a fatal complication, perhaps an adverse reaction to the sedative, perhaps a household accident while she was drowsy. He knows as a doctor what has happened, and he knows as a man concerned with his image that the truth is devastating. His first reaction isn't to call an ambulance. It's too late for that. His first reaction is damage control. He returns to the dinner table, but not to raise the alarm. He returns to get his accomplice, his wife, the daughter of the man whose disapproval he perhaps already felt. Their pain is real, but it's immediately contaminated by a paralyzing fear. The fear of scandal, of professional ruin, of an accusation of negligence leading to the death of their own daughter. The plan is formed in desperation. They cannot admit what happened. The only way out is to create an alternative narrative, one that transforms them from negligent parents into heroic victims. An abduction. It's the only story the world would accept, the only one that could generate sympathy instead of condemnation. The alarm is only raised by Kate at 10 o'clock, giving them a crucial window of time to begin the cover-up. Madeleine's body is hidden, perhaps in the bedroom closet, perhaps in another nearby location. The window is opened from the inside, the shutter raised. The crime scene is meticulously staged. When Kate screams, "They've taken her," the performance begins. The panic their friends see is genuine, but its source isn't a kidnapper. It's the terrible secret they now share. And in the days and weeks that follow, as the world weeps for them, the McCanns' focus isn't just on finding their daughter, it's on managing the crisis, controlling the narrative, and, crucially, ensuring everyone in the family sticks to the script. To understand why intelligent, successful people would make such a catastrophic decision, we need to understand the psychology of pride and self-preservation. Gerry and Kate McCann were successful doctors, respected figures in their community. Admitting that their negligence, even if accidental, led to their daughter's death would be the end of everything they had built. Their medical careers would be over. The stigma of the parents who killed their daughter would be a life sentence. The human brain, when faced with an existential threat, doesn't operate logically. It operates in survival mode. The primary instinct is to eliminate the threat. In that moment, the threat wasn't a kidnapper. It was the truth. The cover-up isn't born from malice, but from terrified selfishness. They aren't thinking like grieving parents. They are thinking like crisis managers. Every interview, every appeal, every tear becomes part of a public relations campaign to sell the abduction story to the world. So far, does this reconstruction of events, fueled by family tension, seem more plausible than the story of a phantom abductor? Does the psychology of fear and self-preservation better explain their actions than the pain of grief? Leave your verdict in the comments. Your agreement is the green light our operation needs to use our most powerful proof. Because the evidence I'm about to show you isn't a theory. It's the proof that seals this case. The definitive proof, the smoking gun that turns this theory into an almost inescapable conclusion, is not an object, but an event. The confrontation between Gerry McCann and Brian Healy. The fight, whether it was recorded or not, represents the moment the family's private narrative collided with the public narrative the McCanns were building. Let's analyze the facts that led to this point. Brian Healy, a simple man, was dealing with the loss of his granddaughter and, crucially, with his own guilt and regret. His statements to the press, like, "I'd have shaken every one of them," weren't attacks. They were laments. They were the voice of his conscience. And it was that voice that became the biggest threat to the cover-up. The definitive proof is the change in Brian Healy's behavior. He goes from a critical and regretful grandfather in 2008 to a silent figure in the following years. What caused this change? Our thesis, based on the reports and the logic of the situation, is that the confrontation with Gerry worked as an effective threat. The threat didn't need to be physical. The threat was, if you keep talking, if you keep feeding the doubts, you won't be helping to find Madeleine. You'll be helping to send your own daughter, Kate, to prison. This is the most powerful weapon in a toxic family dynamic, using a father's love for his daughter against him. Gerry didn't need to shout or be violent. He just needed to present Brian with the impossible choice, his conscience or his daughter's freedom. Faced with that choice, Brian Healy did what most parents would do. He chose his daughter. He fell silent. Brian Healy's silence after 2008 is the most eloquent proof of all. It's a silence that screams. God screams that there was a confrontation. It screams that a threat was made. And it screams that the truth of the night of May 3rd was so dangerous that a grandfather was forced to swallow his pain and regret to protect his family from itself. The leaked audio may be a rumor, but the silence that followed is a documented fact. And that silence is the real confession. With the proof on the table, the question changes. It's no longer what happened to Madeleine, but who helped hide the truth. The answer involves a conspiracy far greater than just a panicked couple. It involves the power of an entire state. The silence of Brian Healy, the grandfather, should have been the starting point for a new phase of the investigation, one focused on family dynamics and internal pressures. But it wasn't. The truth wasn't just buried by a panicked family. It was cemented by powerful institutions that had their own reasons for preferring the fiction of an abduction to the reality of negligence. As soon as the Portuguese police, led by Gonçalo Amaral, began to follow the trail of evidence pointing to the parents, a public relations and diplomatic pressure machine, funded by millions in donations, went into action. Because of the formal suspicion placed on a couple of British doctors, the consequence was overwhelming diplomatic pressure from the UK government on Portugal. The British Prime Minister at the time, Gordon Brown, and his ambassador in Lisbon got personally involved. The narrative in the media, especially the British media, changed overnight. The Portuguese police, once seen as partners, were now systematically demonized, portrayed as incompetent, lazy, and even cruel for daring to investigate an upper-middle-class British couple. Because of the sniffer dog's findings, the consequence was a campaign of scientific discredit. Experts hired by the McCann's defense appeared on every TV channel, ridiculing the evidence, calling the dogs unreliable and the samples contaminated. Because of the DNA result pointing to Madeleine in the car's trunk, the consequence was the British Forensic Lab backtracking on its own findings, issuing a final report that classified the sample as inconclusive, a legal technicality that ignored the overwhelming probability. The system was turning on itself. The tools of justice were being used to manufacture doubt. The final consequence was inevitable. In 2008, less than a year after naming the McCanns as suspects, the Portuguese Public Prosecutor's Office, crushed by political pressure and the media smear campaign, archived the case. Kate and Gerry McCann were cleared. The message was crystal clear. The truth about what happened to Madeleine McCann was too inconvenient. It was easier, safer, and politically more advantageous for everyone involved to maintain the fiction of the phantom kidnapper than to confront the reality that the responsibility might lie within that family. Justice wasn't blind. It was deliberately gagged. The price of a cover-up of this magnitude is never paid by those who commit it. It's paid by those who dare to challenge it. And the biggest collateral victim of this conspiracy of silence has a name: Gonçalo Amaral. He was the chief inspector of the Portuguese Judiciary Police, the man in charge of the initial investigation. He was the first to suspect the McCann story, the first to see the cracks in the narrative. He was the one who followed the trail of evidence, who called for the sniffer dogs, who built the case against the parents. He was doing his job, but for daring to do his job, he was crushed. Amaral was abruptly and controversially removed from the case, accused of criticizing the British police in an interview. He retired from the police force and wrote a book, Maddie, The Truth of the Lie, where he detailed his theory and the evidence that supported it. The reaction was immediate. The McCanns sued him for defamation, launching a legal battle that would last for over a decade. They didn't just want to silence him, they wanted to destroy him financially and professionally. Amaral's book was banned in Portugal for years. He was ordered to pay €1 million in damages to the McCanns, a decision that nearly bankrupted him. Although higher courts later overturned that ruling, the message was sent to any other cop, journalist, or witness who dared to question the official version: tell the truth and you will pay the price. The story of Gonçalo Amaral is the story of how the system protects its own, even if it means devouring its own servants. He became the scapegoat, the man punished for being right. His career was destroyed not by incompetence but by his refusal to participate in the charade. He is the human face of injustice in this case. It's outrageous, it's frustrating, and it's exactly why Operation Black Box exists. If you also refuse to accept the silence and believe that the truth needs to be leaked, then this is your call to action. Officially join the operation, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Every subscription is a new agent enlisting, making our movement stronger and proving that we will not stop until the black box is opened. In the end, the official verdict is an insult to intelligence and to justice. The Madeleine McCann case remains officially open, but unsolved. Over the years, the British police have spent more than £12 million on their own investigation, Operation Grange. They followed hundreds of leads, investigated dozens of suspects, but never got close to an answer. Why? Because from the very beginning, Operation Grange operated under a flawed premise that there was an abduction. They refused to seriously re-examine the possibility of an accidental death and cover-up. They built a multi-million-pound investigation on a foundation of sand. Meanwhile, the McCanns and the Tapa 7 have moved on with their lives. They were never forced to answer for the contradictions in their statements. The silence of Brian Healy, the tormented grandfather, was secured. They won. They managed to sell their story, backed by a system that preferred a comfortable lie to a devastating truth. The absence of a body allowed for legal reasonable doubt, but there is no moral doubt. The evidence, when viewed as a whole, tells a clear, consistent, and terrifying story. Justice didn't fail for a lack of clues, it failed for a lack of courage. The system won. Justice was buried. But in the midst of all this darkness, one final question remains, the most personal of all. What does this terrible story teach us about our own world? And what do we do with this inconvenient truth? The inconvenient truth this story teaches us is that sometimes justice isn't blind, it's selective. My final conviction, after analyzing every flaw and every decision, is that the mystery of Madeleine McCann persists not for a lack of clues, but by a deliberate choice. What haunts me is not the complexity of the crime, but the simplicity of the institutional negligence. The truth wasn't lost in a complex conspiracy. It was filed away in a folder, a victim of bureaucracy, prejudice, and convenience. And that is the most infuriating truth of all. And now, after we've gone through all of this together, I need to know what this story has awakened in you. Use the comment section below not to judge, but to bear witness. Bear witness to your frustration, your outrage. Leave a word, a sentence, that shows we have not forgotten and we do not accept the silence the system has imposed. I will read every single comment, because in a world that wants us silent, our collective voice is the only weapon we have. And for those who want to go beyond bearing witness and want to help fund the next phase of Operation Black Box, there are two ways to do it now. First, you can use the Super Chat to invest directly in our next intelligence acquisition. Every contribution of any amount helps us obtain the next confidential document or pay for the next forensic analysis. It's your way of funding the ammunition we will use to break the next lock. Second, for those who want a seat at the strategy table, you can become members of the channel. Members are our elite operators. They not only ensure the continuous funding of the operation, but they have access to our war room. They see the documents before everyone else, vote on the next targets, and discuss strategies in a closed group. The Super Chat funds the next move. Being a member helps to draw the game map. The choice is yours. And it is thanks to the support of our operators that the next phase of Operation Black Box is already underway. In our next video, we will expose the contradictions in the depositions of the couple's friends, breaking another lock that protects the truth. To continue in this operation with us, subscribe and turn on notifications. The search for the black box cannot stop. Until next time, remember, we will not ask for the truth, we will leak the truth.